It's time to get your checking account to zero with free checking from PenFed. That's zero ATM fees, zero balance requirements, and zero time spent waiting for your paycheck to direct deposit because you can receive it up to 2 days early. Open your account with just $25 and see how big zero can be. Apply online today at PenFed.org/free checking. Early direct deposit eligibility may vary between pay periods and timing of payer's funding. To receive any advertised product, you must become a member of PenFed, insured by NCUA.
PenFed's got great rates for everyone.
Welcome back to the podcast. My guest today is a fellow product of Prince of Wales Island. Melissa Castle grew up in Craig, which is 7 miles from my hometown of Klawock. She's now a dental hygienist in Anchorage and just returned from a bison hunt with her and her boyfriend. Thanks for being on here, Melissa.
Thanks for having me, Jeff.
A couple things that, as a teacher, I try to help kids out with are to not be intimidated either by the scale of the world outside of home, and then also wild, healthy experiences. You don't seem to be intimidated by anything. How do you think that happened, coming from such a big island, small town? Was that a parenting thing, or how did you get to this point?
Probably a little mix of my personality and parenting, I have to say. Growing up in a small town, my parents kind of threw me into everything, whether that was have me do all the sports or all the after-school activities and camping and hunting and going in the boat and checking the shrimp pots and crab pots. That was kind of all expected. That was just the everyday normal. And so that really helped kind of open up my world. And when I moved to Anchorage, like I said, that was a normal thing for growing up.
I kind of had a bias again. I know a lot of people did in Southeast. Like Anchorage is like not even part of the state because it's just a big city, and everything else has kind of like a small town character. Even, Ketchikan was the big city for Prince of Wales people, but Ketchikan only has 10,000. So what's kind of like the sales pitch for Anchorage? It's a big city, but it's Alaska big city. So what are the best things about living there?
I thought the same thing. I came up here for school. I wanted to stay in the state, save some money. And the whole time going through school, I played basketball. So my life consumed of basketball and going to school. And I really didn't enjoy the city. And so when I got done and I graduated, I said, I'm going to leave. And before I knew it, I spent a couple months here. And I thought, well, my sister's here. I'll just give it a try. I picked up some skis. I went and bought some backcountry skis, got back into skiing, and started hiking a lot and doing a lot of outdoor activities. And I just fell in love with this place. It has unlimited trails for biking and hiking, and the ocean is right there. I was able to ski in the winter. I found out all these activities that I wasn't able to do growing up in, not that I couldn't do growing up in Craig, but all these new opportunities I had here, especially being done with school, really drew me in, and I loved all the new things I could do.
Yeah, people think that Alaska is kind of this summer wonderland and hunting wonderland, but you can do stuff year-round, and it does seem like certain areas are more conducive to that winter game. Prince of Wales can be a little bit, like you have steelhead fishing, but you don't really have backcountry skiing or snowboarding or access to a lot of that stuff. So what is something that maybe you've picked up that is kind of your favorite part of living there that you can have as far as winter sports go or winter activities go?
Yeah, I have gotten into skiing a little bit more. I did the backcountry skiing. I did that right out of school. I've also done some classic skiing. I've done a little bit of fat tire biking in the last year, and then just some winter trail running and hiking. But I would say my favorite part is the backcountry skiing, being able to basically hike in the winter using your skins, put them on your skis, and hike a mountain. And then the best part, skiing down, not hurting your knees and floating on fresh powder without having to be around a ton of people and not having to pay a ridiculous amount for the resort. So I'd say backcountry skiing was probably the favorite winter activity I've gotten myself into since I've been up here.
After doing backcountry skiing and putting the skins on to be able to navigate and then taking them off to go down, I thought, why does anybody ever snowshoe, ever?
Right?
It's really not that fun. If you just want to torture yourself, then do that. But man, whoever invented the skins, that's unbelievable. It's beyond game changer.
It's genius, except for you ask my dad after the bison hunt, of course. He's still not a huge fan of the backcountry skis, but yeah, I completely agree. Like I said, once I got into backcountry skiing, there was no turning back for me. It was like the perfect way I could still hike in the winter and then have an awesome time coming down.
Yeah, I noticed in your long list of things that you like to do that was not there, and I wanted to make sure that I drew attention to that.
Yeah, no, it is.
How far is a lot of this stuff from Anchorage? Some people will look at or say it's centrally located, which means that you're actually nowhere and you have to drive hours and hours to get to anywhere cool. But how far is a drive to something that's pretty cool outside of Anchorage?
I think it's all in perspective here. I live on the east side of town, so I'm not by some of the typical attractions of Anchorage, like the coastal trail downtown or maybe Flat Top. Those are probably 20, 25-minute drives from my house, but I have the dog park right here, and I have across the street, I have a trail that is really quiet, and it's about 15 minutes from my house, and I did it this morning, and nobody was on the trail. I can typically get up and down the mountain in an hour and 15 minutes with my dog, so it just totally depends on what you're trying to do. I can go backcountry skiing in Arctic Valley, which is about 20, 25-minute drive, and then also go down south towards the Kenai Peninsula and go backcountry skiing down there, and that's the closest place is probably for me about an hour drive down there. So lots of options. You just kind of gotta pick your direction, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, there were a couple mountains in our backyards on Prince of Wales, but it was a little different going up Sunahay. Those mountains up there, are you going through much timber? It looks like it's fairly bare, so you get a pretty nice view the entire way.
Yeah, there are usually some trees in the beginning of the hikes, but you can get out of it pretty quickly. And that's kind of one of the reasons I do love the hiking up here, because I can do it by myself because of the being able to see quite a bit, in the summertime and not having to worry a ton about, you still have to worry about bears, of course, but being able to see really does help, being able to hike by yourself.
Yeah. Did you have to transition a little bit to being more worried about bears? Because just having black bears on Prince of Wales, we don't worry as much about those, whereas you got the real ones up there. Was that an adjustment?
Yes, it wasn't actually, unfortunately, until I want to say 3 or 4 years ago. I was pretty naive. I would just go on the trails without bear spray. I had a dog, and she howls and barks sometimes, so I was like, yeah, I'm fine. And like you said, growing up from Southeast, you see a black bear, they run from you. It's never really an issue. And then a couple years ago, it was kind of hit close home when there was a kid that died on a race on a mountain that I hike all the time here in Anchorage, called Bird Ridge, and a 16-year-old killed by a black bear. So a couple instances that happened that I was like, you gotta protect yourself. So now I carry a gun, and I have bear spray, and I'm a lot more aware. I don't wear my headphones, so just something that you definitely have to change your mindset coming from Southeast up here. It's different.
Yeah. What type of gun do you take?
I just got a 45 Kimber that I'm going to start packing. Before that was having just bear spray, and then I had a 38 Special that it wasn't a big enough gun, but I just had it for a little bit of comfort. And I would usually have my bear spray as well, but I just got a 45 Kimber that I'll be packing around.
Nice. A buddy of mine that hunts up in Fairbanks, he says like the 45 is really good, but he also likes a 10 millimeter because you have more shots. And so if the thing is coming at you, you're going to have more opportunity to kind of have those throwaway shots and kind of hone in where you're shooting. So that confidence. Hopefully you never have to use it, of course. But yeah, those things are important to keep in mind.
I agree completely. And it's kind of tough because you look at one study and it says this, and then you look at another study and it says bear spray is more effective, and then another study says this. So it is kind of hard to kind of navigate through that. And I've gone through bushes and stuff where I felt uncomfortable and I was hearing stuff, so I pulled that out or had my bear spray ready. But I've actually I've been out of school since 2016, but I've been in Anchorage since 2012. I've never come face to face with a bear on a trail up here ever. I've seen them from distances, and I'm sure they're right off the trail or right there with me. But my dogs are there. I'm loud. So fortunately, I haven't had any issues myself.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just part of life, but you want to be prepared for it. You don't want to be naive, but it's part of it.
Yeah. Yep.
So, speaking of unique experiences, your boyfriend works in Whittier or lives in Whittier?
So he works and lives there Monday through Thursday, and then is back in town for the weekend. This is a newer job for him, so he is getting to experience the Whittier weather and living style of being down there. He works for Linden, the shipping company.
Okay.
So working, unloading the barges and bringing all the freight, putting it on the railroad and stuff, bringing it all into Anchorage. So, yeah.
And for anybody who's not familiar with Whittier, Whittier is, you have to access it by tunnel. You have to go through a tunnel to get that. And 95% of the population lives in a single high-rise apartment condo type complex. Is that right?
Yes. And have to be honest, I've actually never even been through the tunnel and to Whittier. In the years that I've been here, I've been to Portage Glacier, which is right there at the base of the tunnel. Done a lot of activities right there, but that is definitely on my list. I need to go do. So maybe this summer when he's working, I'll go down and visit and get the full experience.
Oh man, that tunnel alone. Can they go traffic both ways through that, or is that a single shot and you got to wait for the people to get out before you can go through?
No, it's a single shot, and it runs, I believe, on the hour, because he's always like kind of rushing to get to the tunnel. The tunnel's only about, I think, a few minutes from town, but if you miss it, you got to wait for an hour.
That's crazy. That is absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
All right, so to the big ticket item here, the bison hunt. I did a little bit of research on the bison hunt, and apparently, according to the Department of Fish and Game, in 1928, there were 23 plains bison moved from Montana to the Delta River area. Grew, and then in the 50s was the first time that there was hunting, and there was about 400 at that time, and now there's around 900. So, and there's 4 herds. Which herd did you draw?
I drew the Farewell Burn, which is DI 352, and that was the spring any sex bison permit that they give out to 7 residents each year, and then 7 non-residents also get a tag.
So when you drew it, were you like, oh my gosh, yes, or thought, well, I just put in, I didn't think I was going to actually draw it. Now I have to do it.
Well, yeah, I love the mountains. I'm a big mountain hunter. I was hoping for a sheep, and when I found out I had the tag, my boss came in and was like, "You got 352," and I was like, "I don't know which one that was. I know it's not a sheep tag." And so I'm trying to wonder, and he's like, he went and looked it up, and he's like, "You got a bison tag," and I was like, "Oh my gosh." And all I knew really about the bison tag was that my dad's been putting in for that for 30 years. Not maybe the fair one specifically, but he's desperately wanted one for a long time. And I thought, oh my gosh, that's really lucky. And so instantly in my head, I remember the conversation that I had with a guy, one of our family friends. He lives in Delta. And so when I was putting in for the tags, well, he lives in Craig now, but he used to live in Delta. I said, which bison permit should I put in for? And he said, well, if you want to increase your chances, I bet, do this one. And so he told me to put in for DI 352. And he told me that not as many people put in for the spring hunt because it's just harsher conditions. And I thought, okay, so listen to advice, put in for it. And then all of a sudden I have this tag. And now I'm like, okay, well, what do I do now? And the planning began. So
how did you tell your dad? Was that a text? Did you play a game with it? How did you reveal that?
It was a text because I was at work that day, and we always know when the tags come out, so there's always a family thread going. And I think my brother-in-law and I were the first to look, and so somebody in the family group said, "Melissa got a bison," and I can't remember specifically what he said, but. Of course, a little jealous, but also very excited because he knew he was coming.
Yeah, that's for sure. I'll pack my bags.
Exactly.
So what then went into the planning? You said that you did a lot of the planning. What was the first round, and how did that develop?
Yeah, so the first kind of set of questions was like, okay, well, now we got to do some research. We got to think about how I want to do this. This spring travel and is going to be one of the main things. So whether that was going to be snow machines or skis or snowshoes were kind of the main things we knew that were going to be an issue. And then whether we wanted to do the option for a snow machine was you could snow machine in from Willow or Petersville. But I knew that I don't have a ton of snow machine experience. My dad does, but I'm up near Anchorage. We don't have one. So that was kind of out of the question right away unless we rented them, but it was still on the back burner. And then we talked to some people my parents knew. My dad actually went to college with the guy that ended up we hired to be our pilot and our guide. And we called him, talked to him, and I got a bunch of information out of him. His name is Rob Jones. He's a guide out there in Farewell and does moose, does sheep, does bison. So he was kind of our first point of contact, and it worked out from there.
So how long what did that take? Like, what was that first phase of planning? How long was that?
I probably reached out to Rob initially, let's see, in March. I probably started talking to him in November of last year, maybe even October, just getting an idea of what his availability was like for that March hunt. And then we also had another guy that offered to help us out, which was my boyfriend's boss. He had a place out in Post Lake on the Post River, which is north into the mountains of where the Roan Roadhouse is, or Farewell. But it wasn't, Post Lake isn't in a spot that usually has bison. So it was an option. He was willing to help, but it's also about 30 miles from the main bison hunting grounds. So we had some options there, but Rob was the one that knew what he was doing. He'd been doing it for years. He flies out there and helps with the Iditarod and helps with the Iron Dog. So he knew where the bison were, and he already had a client that he was going to be guiding out there. So the fact that he was already going to be out there, he could help us, if we needed to be moved or, say we got it in a tough spot. He said he'd be willing to bring the snow machines in. So Rob, like I said, he kind of just made it full circle. And so we decided to hire him as our pilot there and as our guide, but we were kind of self-guiding ourselves. Mm-hmm. He initially was planning on flying us out there in his 206, but he just kept reminding me as the hunt kept getting closer and closer, hey, weather conditions can change. You just got to be flexible. Things can change no matter what. So I'm like, okay. So the plan that we had made initially was not the plan that actually played out, but everything ended up working. So I had to learn to go with it.
Yeah. Some people listen and they say, well, if you knew where the herd was, it's not really, a big deal. It's like a canned hunt, but there's nothing further from the truth, especially if you're going in the winter. I hunted the 40-mile caribou herd up near Fairbanks, and still you don't know exactly where they are, and it's super, super cold. So even though people are giving you updates, hey, the herd is here today and we got some, they might not be there the next day.
Oh, no.
So how much movement what was that herd doing?
Well, it's so the herd itself in Farewell, they say, I think in that unit is about 400, I believe. But there's not just 4 groups of 100 bison. There's groups of 3, there's groups of 15, there's groups of 2. They're spread out actually throughout that whole area, around the Farewell burn and actually up into the mountains. But like I said, it totally kind of just depended on the area, because it seemed like when we first got put in towards the mountains, the 2 big groups were about 17 and 20. And the group I ended up shooting my bison in was about 20, but initially there was only three in that group, and they joined with another group there.
So what was you shot it wasn't on the first day. So what was the first day like? You got there, you're excited. obviously not overwhelmed because you don't get overwhelmed, but what was that first day like?
So the first day we flew from here, Anchorage, we flew right into Roan, which is, they call it the Roan Roadhouse, which is one of the checkpoints for Iditarod. We ended up flying in with a Beaver, not with our main pilot. We had to hire a commercial pilot because the week before they got about 2 feet of snow out there. So they could no longer land a 206 at that airstrip on wheels. So we took a Beaver, and that was kind of like all of a sudden change of plans. We're going with somebody completely different who I wasn't planning to, but it worked out because the Beaver was able to hold a little more weight, and when we returned, was able to haul us out all in one. So we get there to Roan. We stayed the night at this Roan Roadhouse. It was, like I said, one of the checkpoints. It's a cabin that I think was built in about the 30s, and it was super old, tons of history. It was awesome. The Iditarod Trail was right there. A week before, all these mushers had just gotten by, and about a couple of days before we arrived, all the trail sweepers and people were just wrapping up. So it was really cool to spend our first night out there at a cabin. Nice stove. It was stocked really well, and with good firewood. So that was kind of the first day. And then Saturday, the next morning, our pilot, Rob, picked us up in the Super Cub. Or no, sorry, not Rob. One of his pilots that flies for him named John, he picked us up in his Super Cub. And he's like, who's the shooter? Who's got the permit? And I was like, I do. And then he was like, oh, well, you're going first. And I was like, oh, crap. I have to make the decision of where we're landing. But I was like, okay, let's do this. So I jumped in, and he took me out, and we kind of flew around looking at some different spots. And we landed up kind of farther, about 3 miles southwest of where we had kind of initially thought we might be. But it was a good flat airstrip that he could land at, or not airstrip, but a nice flat area he could put his Cub in. And there was 2 big herds, like within about a mile to 2 miles from the place we were going to land. And the idea that we made in our head, it was like the pack out would be downhill. So I'm like, okay, I agreed with it. And actually I had talked to a friend of a friend, and they had just killed a bison in that same area, and you could see their Super Cub tracks. And I was like, oh, perfect. We can use their skin track, they said.
Nice.
So, yeah, we landed there. And
had you been on a Cub before?
I have been in a Cub for the sheep hunt, a couple sheep hunts I did, and then, a caribou hunt. So I love riding the Super Cub. It's awesome. So my boyfriend and my dad came in, and we ended up setting up camp that day. And, at first, like, the adrenaline's there, and we're all of a sudden, like, we're having to dig for our tent, which, we're trying to get to the base of the ground a little bit at least, so we can have, because the stove and stuff will sink and you just have to settle. But we ended up having to dig like 3 feet of snow out for our campsite. And, a nice afternoon all of a sudden became sweaty, and we're tired. And so the day 2 already, we were getting the full experience of the winter hunting there, I guess.
It's crazy.
So, yeah, little details like this that you'd think, in a fall hunt, you don't think about for a winter adventure.
No.
So, so that kind of was the first 2 days, I guess, was flights. So we knew that by the end of that second day, third day we were able to hunt, because second day and first day we flew. So, but we knew on the morning of day 3 that we could get to a vantage point about 1.5 miles away. We would be able to see both those herds that we had seen flying in.
After years of fine print contracts and getting ripped off by big wireless providers, if we've learned anything, it's that there's always a catch. So when I first heard that Mint Mobile offers premium wireless starting at just $15 a month, I thought, what's the catch? But after talking to them and using their service, it all made sense. There isn't one. Mint Mobile's secret sauce is that they're the first company to sell wireless service online only. They cut out the cost of retail stores and pass those sweet savings directly to you. For anyone who hates their phone bill, Mint Mobile offers premium wireless for just $15 a month. I was hesitant about having to get a new phone and a new phone number, but with Mint, you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and keep your same phone and your same phone number along with all of your existing contacts. Mint Mobile gives you the best rate whether you're buying for one or for a family, and at Mint, families start at 2 lines. All plans come with unlimited talk and text plus high-speed data delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. Switch to Mint Mobile and get premium wireless service starting at just $15 a month. To get your new wireless plan for just $15 a month and to get the plan shipped to your door for free, go to mintmobile.com/waypoint. That is mintmobile.com/waypoint. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/waypoint.
So, we wake up day 3 and,
Did you sleep at all the night before, or were you too excited?
I was a little excited, but I also, it was our first time using an Arctic oven. I don't know if you've used one of those, but they hold heat great. However, this little stove we had not been super familiar with. So it was really hot in there. Like, I'm not going to complain about being too hot in winter camping, but that first night in the Arctic oven, we loaded that stove all night and it was pretty hot. So I slept off and on every 2 hours or so you'd wake up, but enough so I could fall asleep and get some quality sleep.
What's kind of your standard hunting? Like, you're not going to sleep super well, but there's a difference when it's like August alpine for black-tailed deer, and then it's March in interior Alaska.
Yeah, and I have to give all my credit to my boyfriend because every couple hours when you would know immediately when that stove went out because that temperature in the tent would drop immediately. It was down to what I think those first couple of nights we were down to 0 to 10 degrees, so not terribly cold, but when you're in a tent sleeping in it, it is cold. Yeah. So he did a really good job of keeping that fire going most of the night. So yeah. So we woke up the next morning and my dad, this is his second time ever being on these skis, so he put them on and was a trooper, and we got to our vantage point that morning of day 3. And we poked up kind of over the ridge, but we were still hidden within some trees. And I'm pulling out my binos. I was going first, and I instantly see probably a half a mile away down below us a group of 4 bison. And one of them was laying down, a couple were feeding. And within those 3 minutes, those bison got up and started walking away. And we kind of retreated back off the hill because we didn't want to be seen, and we went kind of around the side of this little hill we were on and poked up to a better spot where we were hidden. And in those 15 to 20 minutes, those 4 bison were gone. And we still can't figure out why they got spooked. And I kind of believe it was because of our sunglasses, to be honest. We had some sunglasses on that had these super reflective shield on the front, and I think that they saw that because we were still half a mile away from them. So I don't know if they could. The wind wasn't really blowing, so I don't think they smelled us, and we were pretty hidden in the trees still. But the reason I think it's my sunglasses because later that day, my boyfriend and I trekked up to a side of a mountain, and my dad was at the tent, and he said from about a mile away he could see that it looked like somebody was shining their mirror from our sunglasses. Yeah,
I've had that on reflecting off binoculars on an alpine hunt a couple years ago. I'm like, dude, you're such a moron. Like that sort of thing. Like, if you're an animal and you see something flashing like that, like you don't know what aliens are, but you're not down with that. You're getting out of there.
Exactly, and I think probably like you said, between sunglasses and maybe the binos, the sun was directly looking at us, so it was a perfect reflection. Because they, like I said, the 15 minutes that we went up to that new spot, they were gone. And you could see all these tracks, and you'd think, okay, 4 bison moving through this area, you'd know where they went. But all these tracks, it's really hard to tell in the snow. Are those fresh? Are those old? Because it hadn't snowed since the last big snow, which was about a week ago. So those 4 were gone within the first hour of our hunt. So I was like, okay, well, I guess what's next? So my boyfriend ended up seeing a group, within that hour. We see another group of 15 on a mountainside. And we're like, why the heck are they so high up? They, this is a spot that you would typically see a sheep. And there was 2 below him, so there was basically a group of 17, but the 2 were pretty far away, so we couldn't really tell if they were part of that group or not. But at this point, it was in the afternoon, and we're like, it's too, I don't think it's too late in the afternoon to make a stalk on them. We'll check on them tomorrow, because we're still 1.5 miles from the tent now, and then those bison that are on the hillside are still about another 1.5 miles. So we're looking at 3 miles from camp, which is pretty tough for winter conditions in a bison. So
a buddy of mine was talking about the reason and this is, Fairbanks, so it doesn't mean that it's at all, it made sense for at least there, is that it's so much more wind swept up top that you don't have as much accumulation of snow. And so they're able to move a lot more and they're able to find the lichen. I don't know if that'd be the same for the bison, but it's just a lot fewer calories that you have to burn through going around through that deeper snow, lower in those saddles and in between. But was it a little bit more bare up there? Was there a ton of snow in some of these little areas?
That totally makes sense. And we were wondering maybe since it just had snowed the week before, it had snowed that whatever, I think almost 2 feet, that maybe it pushed them up to those areas where they were more windswept. And you could tell that they had been there because they were pawing and there was big tracks that they were getting down to the ground. So I'm sure that was most of why they were up there, because of the being able to get to food. Another thing that we probably thought that pushed them up a little bit higher that we found out later was the wolves that we heard the first night and second night there. And we heard 2 different groups actually. So I think it was between day 1 and day 2 is when, we skinned to a vantage point, and the next day that we put a little stalk on, we ended up putting a stalk on this group of 17. That morning we went up and saw wolf tracks right in our skin tracks. So they had been there the night before using our trail. So that was not to our advantage either.
Yeah. So did you have anything in mind? You said it was an either sex hunt, but were you just looking for any sort of bison? I can't really tell the difference in a lot of these. You can clearly count the amount of points on a black-tailed deer, or look at the size of a caribou or a mule deer or something like that. But what were you looking for as far as buffalo? Or were you picking through it all, or you just wanted a shot?
I wanted preferably to get a male. The high chance that the females were going to be pregnant this time of year is, that was a factor there. So I wanted to get kind of a middle-aged bull there. But when you start getting into 5-6 days into this hunt, I'm like, you know what? I think I'm going to take my opportunity and not be choosy here.
Yeah. Well, especially if the hunt is open for either sex, that means the biologists have said, okay, it doesn't really matter. Either way, it's going to be fine. That caribou hunt, in some areas, that the reason why they're opening it when they do and for either sex is because the herd might not be able to have the food it needs to survive in the area. So, people say as soon as you, open it up to female animals that, it's mismanagement, but I trust the biologists know what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, and they did say in the little packet they send you, they do say we prefer a male.
Right.
But it like you said, that they said any sex. So that kind of takes a little bit of pressure off, because like you said, it is hard to tell when you're out there in the field, the male or the female. And I have zero bison hunting experience besides the research I've done. I haven't looked in the binos at bison very much. So it was a little tricky out there. I'll be honest with that.
Yeah. Which has to figure into the amount of tags they allow, because if they know that people are going there and might shoot a female, they're going to weigh that in to where, okay, well, what if everybody shoots females? Is that going to totally devastate the herd? They're not going to allow that to happen. And so they will probably regulate the amount of people who can go hunt that. The mountain goat hunting behind Ketchikan is the same way. You can shoot either, but it's preferred that it's a billy. But they take into consideration, okay, if people shoot nannies, let's make sure that we don't decimate the population by having, 6 people all make the mistake of shooting a nanny, and then all of a sudden we don't have a population anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. which, when they give out 14 tags per year, I'm sure I'm not the only one this year that shot a female, which maybe I was, maybe I wasn't. But like you said, the amount of tags they're giving out, I'm sure, is a big factor into what sex they're allowing to shoot. Because, the Delta one is a bull only. And my mom got that one several years ago. And I heard terrible stories about them like sitting and waiting or looking and trying to decide if it's a male. So I was pretty lucky, I feel like, in my aspect that I hadn't any sex. Like I said, it took a lot of the pressure off there.
Yeah. So back to the hunt. What happened next?
Yeah, so we woke up that next morning. So I guess it was day 4, but day 2 of hunting for us. And we get up to our vantage point, and those 17, group of 15 and 2 had joined together. So now it's a group of 17, and they actually had come down lower where those 2 had been. And they came down low enough to where we're like, okay, this is doable now. They're not on the top of a mountain. So my dad still wasn't in love with this idea that he's like, this is just the way that they're positioned really puts us in a vulnerable spot for us to be seen. And I'm not sure if we can pull this off. But at this point, we'd been under our vantage point, a couple, maybe an hour or 2 that morning, and we hadn't seen anything else. Those 4 that we spooked the day before were nowhere to be seen. That additional group that we had seen flying in was not there that we had thought we'd seen. So we're like, well, let's try to make a move on this. So we skin down and start making a new track. We leave our sleds because we're carrying behind we had some glacier travel sleds my boyfriend put together, and bright orange neon things, and they worked great, but they were loud. So we ended up leaving those just to produce being seen and being heard. We left those. We put on our whites. We got those white painter suits from Lowe's, put those on, and started trekking across this field. As we're going across the field, we're below them, but we saw about 3 bison in that herd had some visibility of us. But they're standing up and feeding. So we kind of thought, well, if they're feeding, we can move on. So we're about halfway across this field, and I'm looking up, and I thought, those 3, there looks like a couple of them have laid down. So we look in the binos, and sure enough, it looks like a group of sheep. Like 1 is laying down, or no, 2 are laying down, looking over the edge, staring right kind of down into this field. And we still had a couple of most of them were feeding, and then the rest of the herd we couldn't see. So we're kind of stuck out in the middle now, and we're trying to decide what to do. So we said, well, we just got to get to these willows, and then we can work our way underneath them, and we'll be out of sight within like 15 minutes. So we really slowly. We kind of work our way through these willows, and really trying to be slow and get out of sight within 15 minutes. So now we're underneath them, and we start trekking up the hill. We get to a point on the hill where we know we're probably within 600 yards. So we drop our packs, and I like end up loading one in my gun, and I'm getting all excited here. And so I kind of start going first, and it's actually it's a lot steeper than we initially thought. And my dad's on snowshoes because he could not stand those skis the first day. So he was sinking in pretty hard, but setting a skin track while I'm trying to carry my gun and also like trying to be slow and looking in front of me, it was just kind of tricky. So we probably go in another 200 yards, and then so like I said, I think we're probably within 300 now. My dad gets up to me and he's like, okay, go up to this little ledge here with the rangefinder and poke your head over the edge and see if you see them. I'm like, okay. So I go very slow, get to this little knob, and looking over the edge, I don't see anything. And I'm like, okay, well, look back. And he's like, go a little farther. So I kind of go a little farther to another little edge and look up. I don't see anything. And so I wave them. They come up behind me, and he catches up and he's like, okay, go another little farther. So all of a sudden, I'm like at the top of this mountain, and I'm army crawling, and I realize that I'm at the top because I'm army crawling through fresh bison poop. And I'm like, they're
Perfect.
not here, but they were here. So I'm like, shoot. And I kind of slowly kind of make my way up and looking around. And finally I get to the top and, I'm like, they're gone. So we're kind of careful and we're looking around the edges, and we spend the next hour and a half looking all over. We get to the highest point that we're going to be at during this whole trip. I don't know how many feet we were up, but we could see miles and miles in every direction. And those 17 bison were completely gone. They must have seen us cross that field. They got spooked. And we later found out when we flew out that they ended up going 4 ridges over.
Wow.
They were gone. So I wasn't bummed out. I mean, a little bit bummed out, but I was like, you know what? It's not my bison. It wasn't meant to be. The pack out would have been crazy anyway. So we'll just chalk this one up. So we ended up making our way back to camp, which, skinning up is one thing, but then we didn't take our skins off to ski down, which maybe in hindsight we should have, because we would have got like a 10-minute ski, maybe that. But trying to ski down with my rifle with your skins on in my white painter suit, it was pretty comical. Took a tumble or two, which was probably fun to watch.
So at this point, I'm sure you've been on hunts that haven't worked out right off the bat before. So how did this one compare as far as other ones? And just, you want to get it done, or are you getting frustrated? How do you keep that positive mindset? Because you know what you're supposed to think, you know what you're supposed to say, but how do you actually believe that and keep yourself from getting down?
I stayed super positive because I knew that I had so many options. And, I'm like, this is only day 2 of hunting. I'm like, I just felt lucky enough that we got, bison right away and we had opportunities. But it also made me think, okay, this is a lot more technical than I thought. They're a lot smarter than I thought. They have better vision than I thought. We just kind of have to be a little bit more strategic about how we're doing our stock, because it's like, okay, these 2 groups or 2 herds that we saw right away, we spooked. And so I was like, okay, definitely have to approach this differently. But I knew that I had a lot of people on my side, and a pilot said, hey, if you need to be moved because of this, then let me know. So I knew I had other options, but like I said, it was kind of like, shoot, there goes our 2 options that we exhausted already on day 2.
Mm-hmm. So day 3 now.
Yeah. So day 3, we talked to the pilot. I said, hey, we exhausted these 2 options right here. I think we're going to think about moving. And then I kind of wanted to get his opinion because the weather, and we also really were not too thrilled about that area because of the wolves we heard those 2 nights, one on one side of us and another group on the other side. And we're like, well, these bison right here are pretty jumpy, being spooked and stuff. So, and the fact that the hunters the week before had been in there. So like, I wonder if these bison are just kind of really on alert here. So I talked to the pilot. Sounds like the weather was going to change. And he said, well, I'll get you out tomorrow if you want to be moved. So I talked to the guys and was like, I think we should move, because even if we get it back up to our vantage point, you see some bison, we're still looking at like a 3 or 4 mile pack of a bison, which is going to be a lot. So yeah. So we ended up getting picked up in the Super Cub. I sent my dad first this time because he was complaining about sheep hunting for a bison. And the pilot comes back and gets us, and we went back towards where we originally came from, and we got put by what's called Egypt Mountain. It's like one of the, I guess, icons of that, the north end of the Alaska Range. So any of those Iditarod mushrooms are going right through this place called Egypt Mountain. And if you talk to most hunters that have done this bison hunt, a lot of them hang out right here. And one of the reasons I believe we didn't initially go here is they just had the Iditarod. So there's a lot of activity going on right there the week before. So we land and we're on a lake, and we get the tent set up. Way easier to set up a tent on a lake than digging 3 feet down to the tundra. Yeah. And the guys are getting firewood, and it's about 5:30 or 6. And I said, hey, before it gets too dark, I want to get a little bit of elevation to see our options for the morning. So my boyfriend and I put on some snowshoes, which it was the first time I'd done that trip, and start hiking through the Farewell Burn in snowshoes. And I was like, this sucks. This sucks. And so, but we ended up getting up probably about 20, 25 minutes up, got some elevation, and saw a group of 5 bison about 1.5 miles from us, but it's pretty flat. And part of the trail we could get to them would be on the Iditarod Trail. And then I saw, a lake that we could use. So we go back to the tent, kind of put those to bed. We were all paranoid. We're like, wait, can they see us? We're definitely worried about being seen at this point. And, the wind was actually blowing super hard through there. And we were actually even worried maybe about our, fire our fire stove being an issue, but it wasn't. So then we wake up. So I guess this is day 3 of hunting, but day 5 for us. And we hike up to that little vantage point in the morning. And I'm excited at this point. The new spot, we're all like, I think we all had a fresh new energy being put in this new spot. So we hike up to that vantage point that we had been at the night before, and we still see some bison, but they had gone farther away from us, probably about, I don't know, that wasn't too far, but they definitely moved straight away from us. So we thought, okay, well, we still got to get to them anyway, so we'll just start heading that way. We're on our skis, my dad's on the snowshoes, and we start using the Iditarod trail to kind of, we're going parallel with them, and we go down about 1 mile, and then to where we thought we could cut over from a lake and then go on a little hill that we could use to protect ourselves from the wind and to get closer to them. So the Iditarod Trail was awesome. My dad actually pulled off his snowshoes and just walked that. And we were pretty slow and just kind of hunting our way there, because the Farewell Burn is really hard to see through. So unless you're high, you can't tell, if there's some woods in there that have regrown, but you can't see very well. So we wanted to be super careful that we weren't jumping anything that was potentially between us and the bison group. So, we end up getting across this lake. We're trucking across this lake, and I'm like starting to get excited because I just can feel it. I'm like, we're being super slow, and now we're probably like within 1/4 mile. And across the lake, my dad gets kind of nervous because there's a lot of windswept areas that open up and you can see ice. So he ends up going first and gets in front of me, and I'm kind of letting him lead the way now. So we get to this little hill, and ideally the bison were on the other side of the hill, and we're probably within 500 yards of what we thought. So we start climbing this little hill, and we're at a point where we're directly behind them. So my dad decides, he's like, okay, we're going to traverse this. So we start kind of clipping along the side of it, and I see him stop, and he picks up his binos, and I don't know, I just feel it. I'm like, he sees something. So I don't move, and he says, here's the group right around us. And I'm like, oh crap, they're way closer than I thought they were. I still thought we had a good, 500 yards to go. But he sees them, so he says, okay, let me get out my rangefinder and see how close they are, and why don't you drop your pack and get your gun ready. So get my gun ready. He gets out of his rangefinder, and he thinks they're about 200 yards away. So like I said, I took off my pack, I load my gun, and kind of get ready. And my boyfriend, we talk, me, my dad, my boyfriend, we're like, okay, let's leave my boyfriend here, because now that we're so close, they have awesome hearing. We don't want to add any more than it already is right now. So we get ready to go, and I take about 5 steps, and I thought, there's no way I'm going to be able to do this with my skis on still. So I take off my skis, my dad takes off his snowshoes, and instantly I step, and we are in like up to your hip snow. It is deep, because it came right off the lake and got windswept, and it was getting dumped right on this little hill. So we start, taking our big steps, and it's like dragging 30-pound weights on your legs. So we get the little, we probably went 20 yards, and we get to a good vantage point, and now I can see them. I see 2 laying down, and I see about 5 on the left of those 2, and one of them is a calf feeding, and then behind the calf is a couple feeding as well. So it's kind of tricky because we decided that we didn't want to put, a stock on them if they were sleeping, but since some were sleeping and some were feeding, we thought, well, we still got to get to a better position to shoot, because where we were at, there was too many sticks and stuff in the way. It was just not a clear spot. So we kind of move a little bit farther up against the hill, getting a bit of higher elevation, and we get to a spot where there's a nice tree, and I'm like, I could use this as a rest. And my dad's down low hiding. And to get to there, we were army crawling, and all I thought was, oh my God, this is ridiculous. There's snow everywhere. And backstory, I'm having deja vu as we're army crawling, because last time we army crawled, my dad got a Charlie horse, and when we were caribou hunting several years ago, he got a Charlie horse, and he had to send me up there by myself, and I was like, this is ridiculous. So I'm having deja vu as we're climbing through the snow, and we get to this little spot, and I like get a little rest, and he's still down low. He's got his binos out, and I'm getting my rifle ready. So yeah, so here is, we got the calf on the left still with a couple behind that one, and then we got the 2 that are sleeping. So we start kind of looking at the group, looking for a male, and as these couple minutes start to go by, and we're trying to decide which one is going to be in a best position to shoot and which one is going to be a male, for some reason they start to move. The 5 that are feeding start feeding farther away, and I'm kind of starting to get nervous because they're getting more into the trees and I can't see them very well, but there's these 2 that are still sleeping. But like I said, I'm getting nervous because the herd's starting to move away. And my dad says, well, let me look at these 2 that are sleeping. We couldn't tell because they had their butt towards us, so we couldn't tell if those were male or females. But at this point now, as the minutes go by, the only 2 that are left are the 2 sleeping, and the other ones that had fed are feeding away from us, and they're going into the trees, in and out, and they're getting farther away. They're now at like 300 yards, 400 yards. So out of the 2 that are sleeping, the first one on the left gets up, and my dad says, it's a cow. I'm like, okay. And if the trees are in the way and there wasn't a clear shot, and I said, well, and he said, let's wait for the second one to get up. And so the second one gets up, and she starts peeing, and my dad goes, it's a cow. And I said, well, we're going to shoot her anyway, because she's our last hope right now. And, I'm not going to pass up this opportunity. So I get ready, and like, my heart's racing, all the things that happen to you before hunting. You're trying to calm yourself down. And I said, okay, I'm going to shoot her. And he said, okay, wait till there's a good shot. And she whips her head around and looks straight at us. And I'm like, Dad, don't move, like whispering to him. And my dad, poor dad, guy's deaf and he couldn't hear me. But anyway, I'm like, I didn't move, but we were pretty well hidden. So I don't think she saw us, but she definitely knew something was up. So she starts walking away directly from us, and I thought, crap, she's going to go straight up with the rest of the herd, and she's not going to turn left. And in my mind, I was like, just relax, calm down. And like I said, my heart's racing, of course, a billion miles an hour. And she finally turns and starts walking broadside. And I was like, okay. And she stops, and she's in the brush. And my dad, and I said, should I? And he's like, no, wait, that's not a good shot. You want a better shot. I'm like, yep, you're right. Don't get anxious. And so she walks a little farther, and I waited till she stopped, and I was going to count down to myself from 3, but my crosshairs were so steady right behind her elbow. And I just like, everything went out the window, and I pulled that trigger. I felt so good about
Perfect.
it. And she kind of humped up, did her thing, and I shot. She took about 3 steps. She went straight down.
Nice.
And like I said, it was just all happened so quickly. And then as soon as that happened, the herd emerged from the trees, and there was all of a sudden, we thought that there was only 5, but there was, I guess, they were about a group of 20. went up on the hill, and he said, don't move, don't expose yourself, because that's one of the things you don't want to expose yourself. They won't run if they don't see anything and they don't see your threat. So we stayed put and we kept watching, and she didn't get up. She was down. And the rest of the group, with about 3 minutes, over the next 3 minutes, just kind of moseyed their way on and disappeared over that other hill. And then I finally turned to my dad. I was like, we just shot a bison. And like I was shaking. I was like so excited, and I started crying actually. And I think after, my dad was still kind of on alert, like, wait, we're not done quite yet. I just want to make sure. And so then it took about a minute, and he was finally like, okay, we're good.
Awesome.
So yeah, like I said, it was, that 15 minutes was like, will forever be in my mind. It was amazing. And like the fact that I got to do it with my dad, it all came together, like a year and a half of prepping, and it all came together, and it like felt so incredible.
That's awesome. So then,
Yeah.
The most cliche thing that everybody says is, well, now the work starts. So
yeah.
how far was that trek back? How long did it take to take it apart? And then how much meat did you get?
Yeah, so we went down and started field dressing her, and actually, mind you, like, I had a headache. The adrenaline pump was so real that I had a burning headache, but I didn't care. I was like on cloud nine. So we get down to her, and we ended up start field dressing her. We got a hind quarter and a quarter off of her, and then my dad said, well, why don't you guys go back to the Iditarod Trail and get our sleds? Because we ended up leaving our sleds back on the Iditarod Trail, like I said, because they're just loud and more movement to be caught. So my boyfriend loads up the hind quarter. I load up the front quarter, and I take, my gun and kind of anything extra I can kind of pack in there. And we start breaking a new skin track towards that lake we had crossed, because we wanted the shortest route. And that was probably the hardest part of the pack out, was setting that new skin track with that much weight on your back, because you were just sinking through. Mm-hmm. And remind you that we're in the burn. So, one tree's laying down, another tree's laying down, and you're sinking in between them, or you're on top of them. Every step is new. It's kind of a nightmare to walk through. But that's probably, from the kill site to the lake, is probably only 20 minutes. And then we cross the lake, and then we're right at the Iditarod Trail. And then we use the Iditarod Trail to get back to camp. Not camp. Yeah, we went to camp that trip, and hung the meat up, grabbed the sled, emptied our packs, and headed back to the kill site. And that took us about an hour and a half, an hour and 45 to do that trip. And we got back. My dad had got to work. He had the other hind quarter and the other shoulder off. He had the back straps and the tenderloin, the neck meat off. He had the hide laid out, and he was working on the skull. So he like I said, went to work and had a lot of it done. So we got back, and like I said, we finished trimming up, getting the neck meat all figured out, and we loaded up the sleds. Had 3 sleds, and we took the ribs out with the bone in, and 3 full sleds we attached. We're able to get out that last load all in one load. And it was actually, those sleds were a lot easier to do than the weight on the back. The resistance once we had that skin track set, and we had already skied back on it, it kind of had a nice pull to it. So it wasn't bad at all. But I'd say from kill site to camp was about 1.5 miles. So yeah, we did that last pack out when we had full sleds, and we were crossing that lake, and the wind is blowing, and all the reasons for like this to be like, oh, this weather sucks, but like we had a bison in our back, so I didn't care. It was like great. Yeah. And the last probably 15 minutes were pretty tough to get from the Iditarod Trail back down to where we had our tent, because like I said, all those little sticks and parts of the burn really started to hang up on a sled that was weighing like 80, 90 pounds or whatever they ended up weighing. But we had shepherd's pie and backstrap. It was delicious.
That's awesome. What have you done with a lot of the other meat?
So we brought that meat back and processed it all ourselves. We ended up probably having, I'd say 350 pounds of meat, maybe a little more. She actually wasn't that big. She was a middle-aged cow. I think about 6. But we brought the meat home. We hung it in my garage for a night, and then made steaks out of the hindquarters and roast, and then out of the front shoulders, and did a lot, mostly burger, and then kept the ribs, cut those into like short ribs, kept the tenderloin and kept the back straps, and then made the neck meat for burger as well. And we spent the next several days my dad and I ended up grinding the hamburger, and then did that all ourselves. We went and bought some organic grass-fed cow fat and added that back in and made our own hamburger. And then, I saved the bones to make bone broth. So nice. We kind of have a full freezer, and we saved almost everything. We saved the liver. I'm going to try making something with that. Any of the scraps I ended up cooking up for my dog. She loves them, and I put them in the freezer. So she gets a kick out of that. Nice.
Yeah, it's kind of weird going into spring with a full freezer. That doesn't happen all the time.
Yes, and I'm at a point where I think I need to go buy another freezer, actually, which is a good Alaskan problem to have.
It's so good. I hate when I have to go back to the store and buy beef. I'm pretty much out of deer, but getting a caribou, it's nice to have just that meat, and I did some sausage. Have you done sausage with anything?
Yeah. We make deer sausage or moose sausage. Do you make it yourself?
Yeah, the first time I've ever done it was this last time, and man, I'm so bad at it. I cooked the heck out of the sticks, but I guess you have to go through that in order to get better. And I ate them, but you're just like, oh man, this would have been so good. And they didn't have any fat for sale here, so I just bought 2.5 pounds of bacon. So it was bacon and then pepperoni seasoning. So it would have been really, really good. It just ended up being kind of dry.
Yeah. I had the option to take, some of this meat to Indian Value Meats, which is a meat processing place here, and I could have gotten, stuff done with it, meat sticks or this and that. But I'm like, Bison is just too good, so I wanted to keep it as in its original form as possible. Yeah. So
I wasn't sure if the caribou, because they haven't been eating nice green stuff for months, and because they've been wintering over it. Have you heard anything about changes in the either the texture or the flavor of bison meat, spring versus like an August or something?
I haven't heard people specifically talk about the taste. Definitely the fat. This female was not fat at all, and she wasn't. She ended up not being pregnant, but I can imagine they may taste a little better in the fall if they have more fat. I'm not quite sure. I haven't heard too much on that, but I also don't know too much different because I tasted it. I'm like, this tastes great. It has no game flavor at all. Like I said, it tastes like a beef.
Yeah, I kind of prepared myself for that, but when I ate it, it was great. Just ground caribou. I'm like, oh, this is all the fears that I had. There's nothing to worry about there. And I bet the bison was the same way. That's just such a quality meat that it doesn't matter.
Yeah, and they, like I said, the fact that she had no fat kind of had me worried for a second, and the fat was yellow, which I didn't know going in. But all bison fat is yellow apparently. That's weird. So we skin her open, and it's this bright kind of not neon, but really bright yellow. And I thought, uh-oh, what's going on here? But our guide was like, no, that's normal. So. Like I said, she tasted great, and then we ended up already trying the burger that we made, and that was very excellent.
Awesome. Well, what's next? Did you put in for anything else, or are you gonna? What's next in your hunting?
I talked my dad into one more sheep hunt. He's 63, and it about shattered my heart when he told me his mountain hunting days were over last Christmas, and so, or last Thanksgiving, I think. So I talked him into doing one more with me. So August 20th, we're going to do a late sheep season hunt here in the Alaska Range, and we'll see what we can find. We've been on one together so far, and which sheep hunting is. I don't know if you've done any sheep hunting, but I
have not. No.
It's definitely like the fact that the restrictions on it being a legal ram really, really makes the hunt a lot more difficult than, your average mountain hunt. So anyway, my dad and I have not been on a sheep hunt where we've seen a legal one yet. So I'm hoping that we can make something happen this fall. We'll see.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'd love to go on one, but it does seem super, super picky. It's not the difference between I thought it was a billy, ended up being a nanny, like you'd have with a mountain goat hunt, or that's a big deal there. They talk about some people count the rings. I just think, I don't know how you'd be able to count the rings, man. Like, you got to be an absolute pro. And even like some of the seasoned guides are like, dude, don't count the rings, man. Just look for full curl. Don't guess wrong on those. But I know you get some of that country. That country is just unbelievable.
Oh man, and that's why I love sheep hunting. And I went on a goat hunt last year, so any mountain hunting I actually am just in love with. It's awesome. But back to your ring counting, last season I went sheep hunting with a friend of mine, and we spent a couple hours behind the glass at 300 yards counting rings. And it was funny because going into the trip, I said to him, one thing I have not prepared myself well is for counting rings. He's like, oh, we're not counting rings, because if we're at that point, that's just too risky.
Yeah.
Well, but then you catch yourself when there's no other options that are almost legal. We sat behind that glass and we just could not make that ram legal. And so like I said, these sheep hunts keep getting a little bit closer and closer. So I'm hoping my dad and I can produce this year.
Awesome. That'd be cool.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for taking some time out of your day to talk this over.
Yeah.
This is an awesome hunt. And I think I put in for, I don't know which one I put in because I was sure I wasn't going to draw it. So I better be, maybe it'll be some Prince of Wales Island luck, and I'll draw it one of these years. I'll probably end up having to wait in 30 years like your dad.
Well, go put in for D1 352 because there's one less person, I won't be able to put in for that for 10 years.
Oh, okay.
Any bison hunt for the next 10 years. But if you ever get that winter one, let me know, because like I said, there's a lot of logistics to it, but it's totally worth it and totally doable.
Awesome. Well, thanks again. Really appreciate it, and have fun up there in the real Alaska. While down south here, we're just still getting cold rain. We're supposed to be getting warm rain, but it's all cold and had a little snow a couple days ago. It's ridiculous.
Well, don't worry, we're getting all the snow up here for you still, up high.
Yeah, well, that's the further north in Alaska. You guys, that's what you guys get. The southeast, we're more like a little more of that Seattle stuff. We should be coming out of winter a little bit faster, but whatever. Alaskans complaining about the winter, they don't get much sympathy.
No. We signed up for this.
Exactly. Gladly.
Yeah.
All right. Take care. Thank you.
All right. Yes, thanks, Jeff.